The wind blew cold through the broken streets of the alien settlement. Dust and ash floated in the air, making it hard to breathe. Daniel walked slowly, his boots crunching on broken glass and metal. He was tired, hungry, and alone. It had been 3 days since he last found real food, in his hand, wrapped in a piece of dirty cloth. Was the only thing he had left a small piece of bread, no bigger than his palm. He had been saving it for when he could not walk anymore. But his stomach growled so loud now, it felt like a knife in his belly. Daniel stopped under the shadow of a fallen wall to rest. He unwrapped the bread, staring at it like it was treasure. The smell was faint, but still enough to make his mouth water. He was about to take a bite when he heard something, a soft sound. Like a whimper, he froze. Slowly, he turned his head. In the corner of the collapsed building, 2 small figures huddled together. They were alien children, thin, shaking, covered in dirt. Their large eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. The smaller one was clutching his stomach, while the older one stared at the bread in Daniel's hand. The look in her eyes was not just hunger, it was desperation. Daniel's fingers tightened. On the bread, it was all he had. If he gave it away, he might not survive, but if he kept it, these children might not live to see the next sunrise. For a long moment, no one moved. Only the wind whistled through the ruins. Daniel took a deep breath. He stepped forward slowly, kneeling in front of them. The children flinched at first, but did not run. He tore the bread into 2 uneven pieces. The smaller piece he kept for himself, the larger piece he held out to the girl. Her hands trembled as she took it. She broke it in half again. Giving some to the smaller boy before eating, she chewed slowly, her eyes never leaving Daniel's face. Daniel took his own bite, chewing without tasting it. The boy was already eating, but the girl? She seemed lost in thought. Then, without warning, she put her hands together and bowed her head low to the ground. Daniel frowned, unsure what she was doing. She whispered something in her own language, the words soft and strange. Daniel didn't understand, but the way she said them made the hair on his neck stand up. The girl looked up at him, her eyes brighter now, in broken human words. She said, "Leader." Daniel blinked. "Leader? No, I'm just passing through," he said, shaking his head, but she shook hers firmly, as if his answer did not matter. She bowed again, deeper this time. The boy followed her example, pressing his forehead to the dirt. Daniel stood there, not knowing what to do. He was just a tired man who had given away his last bite of food. Why were they treating him like someone important? Before he could ask, the girl stood and took his hand gently. Her skin was cold, her grip surprisingly strong. She pointed toward the mountains in the distance. "Home." "Come," she said, her voice pleading. Daniel hesitated. He had his own journey, his own problems, but looking into her eyes, he felt something shift inside him. There was a weight. There was silent trust she had placed on him. A trust he had not asked for, but could not ignore. He sighed. "All right. Just for a little while," he muttered. They walked together through the ruins. The boy stayed close to the girl, who kept glancing at Daniel as if making sure he was still there. At one point, Daniel noticed strange markings on the girl's clothes, symbols he had never seen before. They looked old, important, almost like the kind of thing you'd see in a history book. He wondered again who these children really were. But before he could ask, the ground shook slightly, far away. A shadow moved across the sky. Daniel's heart sank. It was a ship, and not the friendly kind. The girl saw it too, her face hardening. She pulled Daniel toward a narrow alley, urging him to move faster. "Bad men," she whispered. Daniel didn't know why, but he followed without question. They slipped into the darkness, hiding behind broken walls as the ship passed overhead. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken a turn he could never undo. The last bite of bread was gone, and with it, His old life might be gone too. Daniel woke to the sound of footsteps, soft, careful steps, moving just beyond where he slept. The cold morning air bit at his skin as he sat up. Looking around, at first, he thought it might be scavengers or raiders, but then he saw them, the two alien children from last night. Standing only a few steps away, the girl's large, glowing eyes watched him quietly. The boy clutched her arm. Half hiding behind her, Daniel rubbed his face and groaned. "You're still here." He had left them in a safe corner of the ruins the night before, thinking they would return to wherever they came from. Instead, they had followed him, waiting for him to wake up. "You can't come with me," Daniel said, trying to sound firm. "I have my own path, my own problems." The girl tilted her head, not answering. She took a step forward and placed something in his hand, half of the bread he had given her. Daniel stared at it in surprise. It was cold and dry, but she had saved it through the night. She said one word in her broken human tongue. "Share." Daniel sighed. He ate a small bite, then handed the rest back to her. "You need it more than me," he said. The boy peeked out from behind her, chewing his lip nervously. Daniel could tell they weren't just following him out of gratitude. Something deeper was going on. He gathered his few belongings and began walking toward the eastern road. The children followed without a word, their small feet crunching on the gravel behind him. He stopped, turned, and pointed. "Go," he said, gesturing for them to head the other way. They shook their heads in perfect unison. "Not safe," the girl said. Daniel frowned. "Not safe for you or for me?" The girl only looked at him with steady eyes, saying nothing more. They walked for hours through the quiet wasteland. Now and then Daniel glanced back and found them still there, keeping a careful distance, but never letting him out of sight. When they passed through a half-destroyed village, Daniel noticed something strange. A few alien villagers came out of hiding and froze when they saw the girl. They lowered their heads, almost bowing, before quickly disappearing back inside. Daniel caught the girl looking uncomfortable, her grip tightening on her brother's hand. When they stopped to rest, Daniel sat on a broken wall. The girl sat across from him, her gaze fixed on his face as if trying to read his thoughts. "You're not just some lost kid, are you?" he asked. She didn't answer, but the faintest smile touched her lips. Finally, she said softly, "Blood of crown." Daniel blinked. "Crown, as in royalty." She nodded once, as if it were the simplest truth in the world, before Daniel could question her further. A distant roar echoed through the air. The boy flinched, pressing himself against his sister. The girl's eyes darted toward the hills. She whispered something in her own language, the words quick and urgent. Daniel didn't understand the meaning, but the tone was enough danger without warning. She stood and pulled him toward a narrow side path. Daniel hesitated. "Why are you helping me? I'm not part of this." She stopped and looked at him with an expression that made his chest tighten. "You gave life," she said simply. Daniel remembered the bread. The last bite he had given away without thinking. He hadn't known it would matter this much. By afternoon, they reached a small stream. Daniel filled his flask, while the children drank directly from the water. The girl seemed calmer here, but her eyes kept scanning the horizon. Daniel sat on a rock, debating whether to send them away again. But deep down, he knew it was pointless. They weren't going anywhere. They weren't just following him, they had chosen him. That night, they found shelter in a crumbling stone hut. Daniel made a small fire, its light flickering over the cracked walls. The boy fell asleep quickly, curled up against his sister. The girl stayed awake, sitting near Daniel. She watched the flames for a while, then spoke. "People thank you." "Leader," she said, her voice soft but certain. Daniel laughed bitterly. "Leader, I'm nobody." But the girl shook her head, gave last food. "Protect. Lead." Her words were simple, but they carried weight. Daniel lay back, staring at the dark ceiling, He didn't know what fate had in store. But one thing was becoming clear. The more he tried to walk away, the more these children tied their lives to his, somewhere out in the night. A low hum of engines rolled across the land. Daniel's hand went to his weapon instinctively. The girl's eyes met his, steady and unafraid. For the first time, he realized maybe he wasn't just protecting them, maybe they were protecting him too. The road to the next town was quiet. Too quiet. Daniel kept his hand near his sidearm as he walked, the two children trailing just behind him. The morning mist clung low to the ground, hiding the broken stones and twisted roots beneath their feet. The girl walked with her chin up, alert, while the boy kept close to her side. Daniel still didn't understand why they were following him. Every time he thought about leaving them somewhere safe, something in his chest tightened. By noon, the silhouette of the town appeared ahead. Tall stone gates stood half-broken. With strange banners hanging from the walls, they looked like they had been untouched for years. Daniel slowed his pace, glancing at the girl. Her glowing eyes studied the gates with a mix of caution and recognition. "You've been here before?" Daniel asked. She didn't answer, only tightened her grip on the boy's hand. The moment they stepped inside, the townspeople reacted strangely. Some froze in place, others quickly turned their backs and walked away. A few older aliens stopped and stared, their eyes wide. Daniel could feel their stares moving between him and the girl. It wasn't the usual suspicious look outsiders got, it was something heavier. Almost fearful, they stopped at a small merchant stall to trade for water and dried food. The merchant was an old alien with silver patterns etched into his skin. He was weighing a sack of grain when his eyes suddenly locked on the girl. The scales in his hands slipped, spilling grain onto the table. In a trembling voice, he whispered, "The bloodline still lives." Daniel frowned. "What did you just say?" The merchant ignored him and instead spoke directly to the girl in their native tongue. Her eyes softened, and she replied with quiet words Daniel couldn't understand. Finally, the merchant turned to Daniel, his voice low. "You, human. Do you know who she is?" Daniel shrugged. "Two kids who needed food. That's all." The merchant shook his head slowly. "No. She is the last flame of the crown." The heir, Daniel let out a short laugh. "You're telling me she's some kind of princess?" The old merchant's gaze hardened. "Not princess. Leader foretold in the prophecy of the last bite." That phrase made Daniel's skin prickle. "What prophecy?" he asked. The merchant leaned closer, his voice barely a whisper. "When the heir is dying and bows to one who gives life from their own mouth, that one becomes the chosen protector, the leader of our people." Daniel remembered the moment in the ruins. The girl bowing after he gave her his last bite of bread. He hadn't thought much of it, just kindness to a starving child, but now it sounded like something far bigger. The merchant's words stirred an unease in him. "You've got the wrong man," Daniel muttered, but the merchant only shook his head. "It is not for you to choose." Before Daniel could press further, a loud horn echoed through the streets. The townspeople scattered, pulling children inside and locking doors. The merchant's eyes went cold. "They've found her." Daniel looked at the girl, who stood still and calm, her hand tightening around her brother's. Without a word, she stepped at Daniel's side, as if ready to face whatever came from the far end of the street, armored. Riders appeared, their banners black and red. They moved with precision, scanning every face. Daniel could feel the tension in the air. "Who are they?" he asked quickly. The merchant's answer was grim. "Hunters. They kill the bloodline so no leader can rise." Daniel's instincts screamed at him to leave, to vanish into the shadows before they were noticed. But when he looked down at the girl and saw her steady gaze, he knew he couldn't walk away. "Come on," he said, pulling her and the boy toward a side alley. They moved fast, weaving between stalls and crates. The sound of hooves grew louder behind them. They ducked into a narrow back street. The smell of old metal and wet stone filling the air. Daniel led them through a half-collapsed doorway into a dark storage room. The boy clung to his sister, breathing fast. Daniel peeked through a crack in the wall, watching the hunters search the street. His heart pounded as one of them paused nearby. Scanning the shadows for a moment, Daniel thought. They'd been seen, but then the rider turned away. Barking an order before riding off, Daniel exhaled slowly, his muscles still tense. The girl stepped beside him, placing her small hand on his arm. "You see now?" she said softly. "You are already part." Daniel didn't answer, but deep down, he knew she was right. Whatever path he thought he was walking before, it was gone now. The prophecy had caught him, and there was no turning back. The night was heavy with silence. Daniel sat by the doorway of the abandoned storehouse, listening for any sound beyond the crumbling walls. The girl and her younger brother were curled up in a corner, their breathing slow but not peaceful. Every creak in the wood, every gust of wind, felt like a threat. He had seen the hunters in town earlier, disciplined, armored and armed, with weapons more advanced than anything he carried. If they were truly looking for the girl, then hiding would only work for so long. A faint metallic click broke the quiet. Daniel froze, his hand moving to the grip of his pistol. The girl's eyes opened immediately, glowing faintly in the dark. She whispered something to her brother, who quickly pressed himself deeper into the shadows. Daniel crawled toward the window and peered outside. 3 shapes were moving slowly down the alley, their armor catching slivers of moonlight. They weren't rushing, they were hunting. One of them stopped just outside the doorway, tilting his head as if listening for movement. Daniel's muscles tensed. If they came inside, there would be no talking, only fighting. The girl was watching him closely now, her hand gripping a shard of broken pottery like a weapon. Daniel signaled for her to stay low. The first hunter stepped inside, scanning the shadows. Daniel lunged forward before the man could speak. Slamming his shoulder into the hunter's chest, they crashed into the wall, the man's weapon clattering to the floor. The fight was quick and brutal. Daniel used the butt of his pistol to knock him out before the others could react. The girl darted forward, grabbed the fallen weapon, and tossed it to Daniel. "Go," she hissed. They bolted through the back exit, the younger boy sprinting silently beside them. Shouts erupted behind them. Daniel didn't look back. He could hear the hunters giving chase, their heavy boots pounding against the stone. The narrow streets twisted like a maze, but the girl seemed to know where to turn. They ducked under a collapsed archway, crossed a dark courtyard, and slipped into an alley so narrow that Daniel's shoulders brushed the walls. Finally, they stumbled into a small hidden square lit only by a single lantern. An old alien woman stood there, leaning on a carved staff. Her sharp eyes scanned Daniel. Then the children, without a word, she tapped the ground twice with her staff. A section of the wall behind her swung open, revealing a narrow tunnel. Daniel hesitated. "Who are you?" The woman's voice was dry but strong. A friend of the Crowngo, inside the tunnel. The air was damp and cold. They moved quickly, the sound of the hunters fading behind them. Daniel's heart was still pounding. He glanced at the girl. "You planned this?" She shook her head. "Not plan. Just path." Daniel frowned. Her calm under pressure was unsettling. Like she had lived through this before, the tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber, lit by faint blue crystals in the walls. It was ancient, the stone worn smooth by centuries. Symbols covered the walls, similar to the ones Daniel had seen on the girl's clothes. He ran his fingers over one of the carvings. "These, they tell a story." The girl nodded. "The story of the fall. And the one who will lead us back?" Daniel exhaled slowly. He didn't want to believe in prophecies, but every step seemed to pull him deeper into it. The old woman closed the tunnel door behind them, sealing it with a heavy lock. They will not find you here tonight, she said, but the hunters will not stop, and the war is coming. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. I'm no war hero. The woman's gaze was sharp. You gave your last food to the air that makes you more than a hero. They rested for only a short while before moving again. The old woman led them through winding passages that eventually brought them to the surface outside the town. The air was fresher here, the sky open and full of stars. The girl stood beside Daniel, her eyes reflecting the starlight. Why don't you leave me? He asked quietly. Her answer was simple, because now you are my leader. Before Daniel could reply, a sound cut through the night, a deep, throbbing hum. He knew that sound. Dropships, they appeared on the horizon, black shapes blotting out the stars, heading straight toward the town they had just escaped. The old woman's face turned grim. They are here for her. And for you? Daniel gripped his weapon, his mind racing. He could keep running, or he could stand and fight. Either way, the hunters would never stop until one of them was dead. The girl stepped forward, standing at his side. Her small voice carried more strength than her size. If you run now, they will take all. If you fight, we have a chance. Daniel looked at her, at the boy, at the silent stars above. His stomach twisted with fear. But deep inside, a fire was starting to burn. He had been a wanderer, a survivor, nothing more, but now there was something worth standing for. The night sky was fading into pale gray when they reached the high cliffs. The old woman had led them through hidden paths. Far from the hunters' patrols, the air was thin here, the wind sharp enough to cut through Daniel's jacket. Ahead, carved into the rock face, stood two massive stone doors, taller than any building Daniel had seen. Ancient symbols glowed faintly across their surface, like stars trapped in the stone. This is the Hall of Leaders, the old woman said, her voice low. No one enters unless they are called by the crown's blood. Daniel looked at the girl, who stepped forward without hesitation. The boy clung to her hand, but she walked with the certainty of someone who had been here in her dreams. As they reached the doors, the stone began to tremble, with a deep, echoing groan. The doors slowly opened, revealing a vast chamber lit by pale blue flames. Inside, the air was heavy and cool, carrying the scent of old earth and dust. Statues lined the walls, warriors, scholars, and rulers from centuries past. Their alien faces carved in perfect detail. At the center of the hall, resting on a pedestal of black crystal, was a single object. It was a massive, dark gray stone, round like a sphere, its surface rough but marked with faint lines of light. This, the old woman whispered, is the stone of command. Only the true leader can lift it. Daniel shook his head immediately. I'm not doing this. The girl turned to him, her voice calm but firm. You must, or they will not follow you. I don't need them to follow me, Daniel argued. I just need to get you somewhere safe. The old woman stepped forward, her eyes sharp. Safe? There is no safe. Not while the hunters breathe. Not while your bond to her is sealed. Daniel glanced at the girl. Remembering the moment she bowed after he gave her the bread, he had thought it was kindness, but now it felt like a chain he could not break. He sighed and stepped toward the stone, the sound of his boots echoing in the chamber, up close. The stone seemed heavier than anything he could imagine. It pulsed faintly, like a slow heartbeat. He placed both hands on it, feeling the cold seep into his skin. Daniel braced his legs and pulled. Nothing. The stone didn't move, not even a fraction behind him. The boy's small voice whispered something in their own language. The girl stepped closer, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. Don't lift for you. Lift for us. Daniel closed his eyes. He thought of the long road, the hunters, the old merchant's warning. He thought of the two children, alone in the ruins, their eyes hollow with hunger. He thought of the last bite of bread and the way. The girl's voice had carried the word leader like it meant everything. When he opened his eyes, he gripped the stone again, this time with no thought for himself. There was a sound like cracking ice. The lines across the stone glowed brighter. Daniel felt warmth spread through his arms as if the stone itself was answering him. Then, with a sudden surge of strength, the stone rose from the pedestal in his hands. The blue flames around the hall flared higher, casting long shadows on the statues. A deep, resonant hum filled the chamber, shaking the air. The old woman dropped to one knee, bowing her head. The girl followed, pressing her forehead to the floor. Even the boy copied her, his small hands clenched in the dust. Daniel stood there, holding the stone, his breath coming hard. He didn't feel like a leader, but the chamber seemed to see him as one. "You are chosen," the old woman said, her voice carrying both reverence and relief. "The stone of command has not been lifted for 200 years. Daniel carefully placed the stone back on the pedestal, but the glow remained. He stepped back, feeling the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. "What does this mean?" he asked. "It means," the girl said softly, "they will follow you now." All of them. Before Daniel could respond, the ground shook faintly. The old woman's expression darkened. "They've found us." From far away, deep beyond the stone doors, came the distant rumble of engines. The sound grew louder, joined by the metallic clatter of boots against rock. The hunters were not just searching anymore. They were coming straight for them. Daniel looked at the girl, at the boy, then at the old woman. He could run, taking only the children, or he could stay and face what was coming. His grip tightened on his weapon. The girl's eyes met his without fear. "You are leader now. So lead." The sound of engines grew louder, vibrating through the stone floor beneath their feet. Dust fell from the high ceiling as Daniel turned toward the massive doors. The old woman's voice was steady but urgent. "You have little time. Call them." Daniel didn't understand. "Call who?" The girl stepped forward, her glowing eyes fierce. "The stone chose you. The warriors will hear." Before he could ask more, she placed her small hand against the stone of command. The faint hum inside it deepened, and the blue flames along the walls blazed brighter. From hidden passages within the hall, shadows began to move. Tall figures in old armor emerged, their faces hidden by helmets carved with the same symbols Daniel had seen before. They carried spears and curved blades, their movements silent but filled with purpose. "These are the keepers," the old woman said, "sworn to defend the leader of our people." Daniel swallowed hard. Looking at the line of warriors now kneeling before him, he had never commanded soldiers before. Back on Earth, he was just a drifter, someone who avoided trouble when he could. But here, avoiding trouble wasn't an option. The hunters were coming, and if they broke through, everyone in this hall would die. The girl stepped to his side, voice quiet but certain. "You lead, I follow." Daniel nodded slowly. He looked at the keepers, at their weapons, at the way they watched him as if waiting for orders. He forced his voice to be steady. "Seal the upper doors, block the side passages, and make them fight where we can control the ground." The warriors moved instantly, their armor clinking softly in the shadows. They worked quickly, dragging heavy slabs of stone into position, tipping over ancient statues to block narrow entries. Daniel took position near the front, where the main doors would open. He crouched behind a low wall of broken rock, checking his pistol and the scavenged rifle from one of the fallen hunters earlier. Beside him, the girl stood with a small blade in her hand. Her younger brother crouched behind her. "Keep him safe," Daniel said firmly. She met his gaze. "We all keep each other safe." The pounding on the outer gates began, heavy and rhythmic, like a war drum. Each slam echoed through the hall, shaking the ground. Then came the sharp whine of cutting tools, energy torches slicing through the ancient metal. Daniel's grip tightened on his weapon. "Hold until they breach," he ordered. "Then hit them hard." The old woman moved. Among the warriors, murmuring words in their language, Daniel could feel the tension building. The air thick with the scent of burning metal as the hunters cut deeper into the gates. Then, with a final deafening crack, the doors burst inward. A wave of black-armored hunters surged inside. Weapons raised, Daniel fired the first shot. The sound thunderous in the confined space. A hunter dropped, but more pushed forward. Shouting orders in their harsh tongue, the keepers met them head-on. Their curved blades flashing in the blue firelight, the clash of steel and the hiss of energy. Weapons filled the hall. Daniel moved along the front line, firing where the keepers left gaps, covering their flanks. The girl stayed close, quick and precise, striking at exposed joints in the hunter's armor. For a child, she fought with the focus of someone much older. The hunters pushed hard, but the narrow space worked against them. Their numbers meant little when they could only come through a few at a time. Daniel used the low wall as cover, popping up to fire and then ducking down as shots scorched the stone around him. A blast hit near his position, showering him with dust and shards of rock. He coughed, wiping grit from his eyes, and kept shooting. One hunter broke through the line, charging toward the children. Daniel leapt from cover, tackling him before he could reach them. They hit the ground hard. The hunter's blade slicing across Daniel's arm. Pain flared, but Daniel didn't let go. He drove his elbow into the hunter's helmet until the man went still. The girl pulled Daniel back to his feet, her face pale but steady. "You bleed." For us, the words hit him harder than the pain. There was no time to answer. Another wave of hunters was forcing its way inside. Daniel signaled the keepers, "Fall back to the second wall." They moved with discipline, pulling the fight deeper into the hall, where the defenders had the advantage. The hunters followed, only to be met with a trap. Loose stone slabs dropped from above, crushing several instantly. The battle raged on for what felt like hours, though it could only have been minutes. Finally, the surviving hunters began to retreat, dragging their wounded with them. The blue flames dimmed slightly as the echoes of fighting faded. Daniel leaned against the wall, breathing hard, his arm throbbing where the blade had cut him. The keepers stood silently among the fallen, their armor streaked with black blood. The girl stepped in front of him, her eyes brighter than before. She knelt, placing her small hands on his wounded arm. "You are our leader," she said softly, "and now." They all know it. Around them, the keepers lowered their heads in respect. Daniel looked at their faces. The shadows behind their helmets and felt the weight of what he had just done. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was the beginning of something far greater. The hall was silent now, except for the crackle of dying flames. The scent of smoke and scorched stone lingered in the air. Daniel stood near the center, his arms still bleeding under a rough bandage. The keepers were gathering the fallen, laying their bodies gently in a line of honor. The old woman moved among them, whispering blessings in the old tongue. The younger boy sat on a step, watching Daniel with wide, trusting eyes. The girl approached slowly, her small footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. Her blade was still in her hand, though its edge was stained. She stopped a few steps away and lowered herself to one knee. Her head bowed deeply, her voice quiet but clear. "You gave your last food to us. You bled for us. You led us to victory. Now we give our lives to you." Daniel felt a lump form in his throat. He shook his head. "I didn't come here to be a leader." The girl lifted her gaze, her glowing eyes unshaken. "You are. Whether you wish it or not." One by one, the keepers came forward, kneeling in a circle around him. Their weapons were laid on the ground before them, a sign of loyalty that could not be faked. Even the old woman lowered her head, her staff Resting beside her, Daniel looked around at them all, warriors, children, elders. Every face turned to him with the same silent question. Would he stay? Would he lead? He thought of the path that had brought him here, the ruined streets, the last bite of bread. The moment the girl bowed for the first time, he thought of how many times he had tried to walk away, and how each time the children had followed without fear, and he realized something. They had chosen him long before he was ready to choose them. Daniel straightened, his voice carrying through the chamber. I can't promise an easy road. His words were simple, but steady. I can't promise safety every day, or that we'll win every battle. But I promise I will not abandon you. The blue flames along the walls flickered, as if in answer. I will fight with you. I will bleed with you. And if I must, I will fall with you. You are my people now. A ripple of sound moved through the hall, not cheers, but a low hum of approval. The girl rose to her feet, stepping close enough to place her small hand in his. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was strong. Then we are yours, she said. The boy hurried over, clutching Daniel's other hand, looking up at him with a shy smile. Daniel knelt so he was level with them both. You're not just my followers, he said. You're my family, outside. The great stone doors, the first light of dawn, touched the cliffs. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of fresh earth after a long night of smoke and blood. Daniel walked with the children to the edge of the overlook, the keepers following. At a respectful distance, from here, he could see the valley below, the scattered villages, the winding river, the far hills where the enemy might still gather. The girl stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the horizon. They will come again, she said, not as a warning, but as a certainty. Daniel nodded slowly. Then we'll be ready. He felt the weight of the stone of command still in the hall behind them, but also the weight of a promise that mattered even more. This wasn't about prophecy anymore. It was about the faces that had knelt before him, the lives that now depended on him for the first time. The thought didn't feel like a burden, it felt like purpose. The old woman stepped forward, her staff tapping lightly on the stone. The oath is spoken, she said. Now the work begins. Daniel glanced back at the keepers, at the rows of warriors who would follow him into any fire. He didn't know how long this fight would last. He didn't know how many more battles lay ahead, but he knew this: he would not run. The girl tightened her grip on his hand, the boy pressing close to his side. In the pale morning light, they stood together, not as strangers who had met by chance, as a leader and the people who had chosen him. As the sun broke over the horizon, casting gold across the cliffs, Daniel felt something deep inside him settle. This was where he belonged. This was the path he would walk. And from this day forward, whatever came, they would face it together.